This is Curl Up with a Cattail, and I'm Gwen Cooper, the New York Times bestselling author of numerous cat-centric titles, including Homer's Odyssey, A Fearless Feline Tale, or How I Learned About Love and Life with a Blind Wonder Cat, Spray Anything, More True Tales of Homer and the Gang, and The Book of Possum, Head Bonks, Raspy Tongues, and 101 Reasons Why Cats Make Us So happy. We're here to celebrate all things feline and to tell inspirational cat tales. Let's get started. Hello, and thanks so much for joining me for Curl Up with a Cattail with Gwen Cooper. I am, of course, Gwen Cooper, and so delighted to be here. Later on in this episode, we will be talking with reader and friend Melanie Paradise, telling us an amazing, heartwarming gotcha story about her cat, Idia. If you would like to be considered to be a guest on a future episode of Curl Up with a Cattail, or if you would like to know more about the books about cats that I write, or if you'd like to find out how you can get your cat, you and your cat's name, your name and your cat's name. Grammar is hard. Your name and your cat's name in an upcoming book that I am writing. And actually my next book will be published in April of 2021. So if you would like to find out how you can get your name and your cat's name included in that book, head on over to gwencooper.com. There are comment boards and contact forms and all kinds of interesting stuff that will give you the hookup, and I look forward to seeing you over there. I am actually recording this episode of Curl Up with a Cattail, unusually for me, very, very early in the morning. It's about 5 a.m, and I'm sorry to say that I've actually been up already for a couple of hours, and I'm an early riser, but this is early even for me. And you know, I think I had said on a previous episode that I've been having trouble sleeping lately. And so I've been looking at various solutions for sleep aids and sleep problems and ways to help insomnia. My problem is not so much that I can't fall asleep. It's that I keep waking up and then I ultimately end up waking up for the day way too early. So I was reading about weighted blankets, and I don't know if any of you guys have tried weighted blankets. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a blanket that is heavy. The blanket that I got is about the length and width of a twin bed. So it's just for me. It's not for Lawrence and me. And it weighs, and this is true, it weighs 15 pounds. So that should give you a sense of how heavy this blanket is. And it's made out of some kind of, I don't know, it seems to be filled with something that maybe has sort of the texture or consistency of like beanbag material. Maybe. I mean, it's definitely not down. I'm not sure what it is, but I can tell you that my cats love it. So of course the joke is, right, that I bought this for me and it was immediately appropriated by the cats, which is not such a big deal during the day. You know, they love sleeping on it during the day. It's the new thing. They are forever chasing each other off of it. So I'll walk through the bedroom, let's say on my way to the bathroom, and I will see one cat snoozing peacefully on top of the weighted blanket. And then 2 seconds later, having, gotten my antacid or brushed my teeth or whatever I was going in to do, I walk back through the bedroom and see the other cat there. And the first cat is nowhere to be found. And so clearly what is happening is that Clayton and Fanny are letting each other sleep on it just so long. And then one of them is like, all right, you've had it long enough. Now it's my turn, and demands a switch, which is all well and good during the day. And I certainly do not begrudge them their enjoyment of the blanket, even if it means that I'm seeing less of them downstairs during the day. The problem is that they are not willing to give it up at night. And they also don't chase each other off of it at night. I think because they know that I, of course, am not a fan of either of them chasing the other one away from, and I mean, not in, I understand they play, they chase each other around when they're playing, but I'm not necessarily a fan of one cat is sleeping peacefully and minding his or her own business, and the other cat comes up, starts hitting him or her in the head and chases him off, which is something that they do to each other. Anyway, so the equitable solution that they have found, or that they believe they found for nighttime, is for all three of us to use the weighted blanket at the same time, with me underneath it and the two of them on top. So I'm not exactly sure what the science, if there is even any, behind the weighted blanket is. You guys can look it up. It really is a thing that people are writing about, especially for people maybe who have sensory input differences, people who are autistic, things like that. I'm sure that there is some science. I really bought this kind of in a spontaneous fit of, I'll try anything. I don't know how exactly what the mechanism is that makes it work, but I am fairly confident that it was never intended as a sleep aid for the 15-pound blanket to also bear the weight of 15 pounds worth of cat. And yet that is how the weighted blanket is now being used in my house. So I get underneath it and the cats get on top of it. And I now have roughly 30 pounds of weight on top of me as I'm trying to sleep. And perhaps in what may be an unsurprising twist that anyone could have seen coming, it's not as comfortable as you would think it would be. And if you were thinking, well, that doesn't sound like it would be comfortable at all, you would be right. It is even less comfortable than that. So the long and the short of it is that once again, I have been up since 3:00 this morning. And I decided, since I was up, I finally, I don't like lying in bed trying to fall asleep. I would rather do almost anything else. But I also didn't feel like reading. That's sometimes what I do. I turn on the bedside lamp and try to read and fall back asleep. But this time I went downstairs and I binge watched the entire season thus far of WandaVision on, streaming on Disney Plus. And I may as well admit right here, and I don't know how you guys listening feel about this. So I've never read a comic book. I've actually literally never read a comic book. Even when I was a little kid, I was aware of comic books, but I didn't read comic books. I'm afraid that when I was a kid, you know how it is. You get to a certain age and you don't want to read things with pictures because you feel like that's for babies. And any grown-up who gives you something with pictures in it, it's because that's for babies. And so it was just not anything that I got into when I was younger. And then it was not a habit when I developed when I was older. Lawrence, of course, went through a heavy comic book phase and knows all the backstories for various comic book characters, at least up until, let's say, the early 80s when he stopped reading them. Having said that, though, I have been enjoying the Marvel movies of the action and spectacle of the Marvel movies over the last decade or so. And I think there's actually some genuinely good storytelling in there. And I have to say that I really was enjoying WandaVision, in no small part because I love Kathryn Hahn, who's just one of my favorite actresses. And Kathryn Hahn's character is there. She's always playing the wacky neighbor, Agnes, and Agnes has a bunny. Anyway, not to get too far into this, but the point being, and here's a major spoiler alert, if you haven't watched it yet, or if you're planning to watch it and you haven't gotten to the 8th episode, then you may certainly skip the next 30 seconds to 1 minute of this podcast. So I'm giving you a chance to skip ahead if you want to. But it is ultimately revealed that Kathryn Hahn's character, the one with the bunny, is the bad guy, or a bad guy. I don't know how many bad guys may end up materializing in this thing, but she is a bad guy. And she comes in to give her big, bad guy monologue. Here's my evil plan and why I was doing it. And she's holding her bunny, the rabbit, while she's doing so. And I am not ashamed to tell you that I was so afraid. Like now that we know she's the bad guy, she's a bad guy holding a bunny. And I was so afraid for that bunny. I think this is actually why I couldn't have fallen back asleep, because sometimes I get up at 3 a.m, I watch TV, I read a book, I do fall back asleep, and I sleep until 6 or so. But I think the bunny thing got me very tense, and I'm sure you guys can relate to this. If there is an animal of any kind in a movie or a TV show, I have to know that the animal is going to be okay. And I think the real foundational trauma for me in this regard, and it also involved a bunny, and I'm sure you know where I'm going with this, was the movie Fatal Attraction, which I believe was the last time I actually saw an animal harmed in a movie, because since then I make a point of knowing and steering really wide around these things. I'm actually not a person who goes to see many animal movies. You might think, based on what I do, that I would be first in line to see any animal story. I can't. It's so hard for me. Even the happy, feel-good ones, if I know the animal is going to suffer at some point, which everybody suffers in a story along the way, that's kind of the point. That's what gets you to the happy ending, is the hardships that have been overcome. And I understand that. I can't bear the hardships for the animal. And I was going to say that I should have known better. Nothing happens to the bunny in WandaVision, at least not as of yet, by the way. And I was going to say, and I should have known, of course, that would be the case, because this is a Disney show. I mean, it's the Marvel universe, but it's done under the auspices of Disney. And Disney is certainly not going to hurt an animal, but Disney killed Old Yeller. And that, actually, Old Yeller, and Disney also, as I'm thinking about this, Disney shot Bambi. Or Bambi's mother, sorry. Disney shot Old Yeller, and then Disney shot Bambi's mother. And those were the two foundational traumas when I was a kid, when it came to animal movies. And that's why it's so hard for me to this day to even watch happy animal movies, because I just remember the feeling of being a little kid and feeling so betrayed that Disney, that made such happy movies with happy endings, would end one movie with the dog getting shot, the beloved family dog, and another movie with Bambi's mother getting shot. Although I will say, I do remember my mother dragging me out of the movie theater before the end of Bambi in a vain attempt, but she wasn't quick enough. And so looking over my shoulder, I saw what had happened, but in a vain attempt to protect me from Bambi's mother getting shot. I also remember, and this is true, I don't know if you guys remember the Benji movies, but I remember going when I was a kid. I don't remember which one it was. I don't think it was Benji the Hunted. I think I was too old by then, but it was one of the Benji movies. I'm not sure which. I think it came out, I think it was like For Love of Benji, I think was the one that it was. But anyway, Benji crosses, Benji the dog, who has his adventures, and there's a series of movies about him. And in this one, Benji crosses paths with some spies who encode secret information on his paws. They put the information on his paws. And I remember being a little kid, like 5 or 6 years old, and I was a very well-behaved little kid. I will say, not necessarily in my house. I'm sure my parents would tell a different story. But when I was out in public, I understood that it was my job not to embarrass my parents by making a scene, even when I was very small. That there were good kids and bad kids embarrassed their parents by making big scenes, and I was a good kid. And nevertheless, however, when seeing For Love of Benji in the theater, I do remember that when the spies or whoever it is, they're like encoding the information to hide it on Benji's paws. And I started screaming, "They're hurting him! They're hurting Benji!" And they're hurting his paws. And so you know how it is in a theater full of kids. If one kid starts screaming and crying, every other kid starts screaming and crying. And so it went from just me being hysterical within seconds to about 150 kids. All of a sudden, everyone was crying. Everyone was hysterical. My mother was so mortified. She dragged me out of the theater. And I don't think I saw another animal in a movie from that day until I saw Fatal Attraction. And, and so really my big takeaway has been that I have to be very trepidatious when it comes to animals in cinema. Apparently it is a little too much for me to take, but I always say there really for me is no worse imaginable nightmare than some scenario in which, the only thing harder for me than watching an animal get hurt is the idea that I might in some way hurt an animal. I do have to say, and I will confess this to you, and I am embarrassed to confess this, but my cat's claws have not been trimmed since quarantine started. And that is because I am now afraid to trim my cat's claws. And that is because I used to trim Homer's claws sometimes when he was around, obviously. But Homer over the years got more and more sort of morbidly, obsessed with his own paws or with people not touching his paws. He didn't want anyone to touch his paws, much less trim his claws. And this was really a feeling in him that grew as he got older. And one day I was trimming his claws and he jumped or he flinched and I ended up cutting a little too far and he bled a little bit. And I cannot begin to tell you, it's hard for me. You can't see me right now as I'm talking, but as I'm telling this, like I'm all clenched up. My hands are all clenched up. It's still so upsetting. It is so upsetting for me to think about. And I have done things that my cats have found unpleasant or even a little painful. When Vashti had chronic renal failure, I had to give her shots every day for her anemia. When Scarlett had diabetes. Sorry. As I said, I didn't sleep much last night, so you'll have to bear with me occasionally losing words. Vashti had chronic renal failure and anemia, and so I had to give her subcutaneous fluid injections and shots for her anemia. And so both of those things involved putting needles in her. And Scarlett also. Scarlett was diabetic for about 6 months. We got it under control fairly quickly. But for 6 months, I had to give her an insulin shot every day. And occasionally, when you do it in that soft flap of skin at the back of their neck, where they really don't have many nerve endings and they really don't feel much. But every so often you hit a blood vessel and it bleeds or you jab it in, not quite the right way and they jump a little and it hurts them a little. And that I did manage to hold it together and to do without feeling horrible about it. And I guess because, there was the knowledge that they will die, it's this or they die from lack of care. Like I could be the squeamish mom or I could be the mom who gives them the medical care that they need. And obviously I chose to be that second mom. And, we were able to keep Vashti with us for another year because I was able to give her all this care at home. So I'm not sure what it is with the claws. I guess because they have plenty of scratching posts. Their nails, their claws might be a little long for my personal comfort. Like Clayton loves to lie on top of me and knead my skin. And so when his claws are too long and I'm wearing a thin shirt, especially, that can be a painful process. We've got a couple of snags on the material on the couch because the cat's claws have not been trimmed. So it's not like there's no downside, but I guess because in my head, it is not a life and death health issue. And so there is just the downside of me cutting too far or doing it the wrong way. I guess also because it requires a little bit more skill. At the end of the day, jabbing a needle in is jabbing a needle in and you do it once, whereas cutting a cat's claws is something you have to do on 10 separate digits. And, Clayton is actually really good about things, but Fanny is so squirmy. She's so skittish. Fanny, I love her to death, but for a cat who's lived with me for all 9 years of her life and who is so affectionate and so loving toward Lawrence and me, she still has that cat thing where she is ultimately so mistrustful of our motivations. And I'm not really sure why, because nobody has ever hurt Fanny in this house. I wrote in my book, My Life in a Cat House, of a time, Fanny had like a little price sticker stuck on her paw. Like obviously a price tag had fallen off of something. Fanny had walked over it and it stuck to her, and not even stuck that hard. And when I say stuck to her paw, I don't mean like chewing gum in a shag rug. I mean like a Post-it note to a piece of paper where it dislodges with a minimum of effort. But she couldn't, she was shaking her paw and it wasn't falling off. So I picked her up, pulled it off her paw, put her back down. And the cat, I kid you not, hid from me for 3 hours. Every time I walked by, she ran under the bed, like truly like I was Carrie at the prom. She ran and hid from me. And so Fanny, needless to say, when I pick her up and wrap her in the burrito to attempt to trim her claws, does not go willingly or without a struggle. Clayton, fortunately, does not struggle at all, but I can't do it. I'm too afraid of hurting them. And I am so excited for everyone in this house to get vaccinated so that I can get my first haircut since December of 2019. Those of you who follow me on Facebook may have seen the picture of that I put up of my hair. It's very 80s-tastic, very hair band, very metal band. It's a lot of hair. It has not been cut since December of 2019, and I always have a lot of hair, even when I'm up to date on my haircuts. But I'm very excited to get a haircut, and I'm very, very excited for the cats to have their claws professionally trimmed by someone who will not hurt them or be afraid of potentially hurting them the way that I am. And the other thing that I'm really excited about right now is our interview. See, there's my segue. Our upcoming interview with reader Melanie Paradise about her cat Idia. And that's going to be coming at you in just a few moments. So please stick around for more Curl Up with a Cattail. And now it is time for my favorite part of the Curl Up with a Cattail podcast, and that is the part of the podcast where we get an actual cattail. Speaking with me today, I have two friends. This is true. I have two and only two friends named Melanie. One of them is a dear friend from my South Beach days, who now lives in Australia. And her name is Melanie Morningstar, which I think is such a great name. And then my other friend, Melanie, who is joining us today, her last name is Paradise. So I have two friends named Melanie who both have amazing last names. I don't know if that's some sort of like a Melanie rule that got enacted at some point when I was not aware of it, but I feel very lucky to have both of them in my life. They are both amazing cat women. And Melanie Paradise, who's with us today, say hello, Melanie.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning. Melanie is joining us from Tennessee, and Melanie is actually one of the most fascinating people I know. And that is because so many of us, I've heard from so many readers over the years who have said some version of, man, if I won the lottery, if I had all the money in the world, I would just buy a piece of land somewhere and fill it with animals. I would just have animals all over the place. That would be what I would do. And Melanie, to my knowledge, Melanie, you've never won the lottery. That is, if I'm correct.
No, unfortunately, I am still waiting.
Okay, so Melanie has never won the lottery. Melanie has an actual real 9-to-5 office job. And yet Melanie also lives on a farm filled with animals. Tell us a little bit, because Lawrence and I, and again, Melanie is a friend. Melanie is a reader who won a visit from Gwen Cooper contest 10 years ago. Second prize was win 2 visits from Gwen Cooper. It's a little joke. And Melanie and her partner Sarah and Lawrence and I just all really hit it off. And so we all became friends, and they visit us in New York. We visit them in Tennessee. And so Lawrence and I, city slickers, are just fascinated by this. But Melanie, tell us a little bit about your farm.
Well, we have been on our farm now for 11 years. And the original intent of our farm was to, one, get out of the city. And I grew up in a rural area. I grew up on a beef cattle farm. And I wanted to sort of get back to that. And fortunately, my partner was game for it as well. But our original intent was to have horses because I grew up riding horses. I've been riding since I was 6. And I used to show horses. And I wanted to get back to that. So we began to look for land that would accommodate basically a nice farmhouse, some fencing, a barn, and some horses. We found this place outside of Knoxville. We did get the horses, and then we decided we wanted to get cattle, and we have chickens, and we have 2 dogs, and of course we have a house full of cats. I will not say the number this morning, but it is the lowest number we have had in 11 years.
Okay, so I am going to make you say that number, by the way. I don't know why you thought you were going to come on a podcast called Curl Up with a Cattail and not have to disclose how many cats you have. When Lawrence and I met you and we came to visit you, you had, I think, around 11 cats. Is that correct? Yeah, something like 11 or 12.
As many as 13.
And how many do you have now?
We have 6
Okay.
in the house. We have one barn kitty outside who lives a very posh horse barn kitty life with a heated and cooled room, and we actually have a rescue kitty right now who needs a home.
Well, we will actually get to information about that a little bit later on. If anybody's in the Tennessee area looking for a new feline companion, that is good information to have. And again, I will say, with how many cats you have, Lawrence and I visiting, and because you do live on a nice sized piece of land, and the cats are sort of indoor outdoor cats. And so it never feels like it's a house crammed full of cats or anything like that. It actually feels pretty spacious and pretty mellow as far as the cats are concerned.
Thank you. We feel like they have ample room. They have a kitty pen that they can go to, and the house is large enough. We have a screen for it. So.
And you grow your own catnip.
Yes, we do grow our own catnip.
Yes, that was actually how you mailed some before you and I had actually met. You had sent some catnip to Homer. So your cats basically live on a nice sized piece of land with horses and cows and chickens and homegrown catnip that they can just kind of roll around in, I'm guessing, in a little patch by your house. So it's a pretty idyllic life for the cats, it sounds like.
It is. I think our cats are very happy.
And certainly very lucky. And you are actually involved in, or you have been involved in cat rescue for a long time also.
That's correct. When I lived in town in Knoxville, I was looking for, something to get involved in. And so I had never volunteered with any sort of rescue group before, but I found interest in one of the groups that had cats in one of the local pet stores. So I began to volunteer with them and ended up serving on their board of directors for 3 or 4 years. And part of my job was to keep the website updated with the pets that were coming in, the new pets coming in. And also, I would go to the local county shelter to pull cats to come into our rescue group. And that was probably my most favorite thing on earth because I knew I was truly saving a life. The shelter is doing very well now with numbers, but at the time, unfortunately, they struggled like many shelters with, taking in far more cats than they could possibly adopt out. So I always loved going and always made a point to go pull cats when we had a space available.
Okay, and so one of the cats who you pulled out, I believe this is the origin story, but you will tell us, is the cat we want to talk about today. The cat's name is Idia. I just want to precede all of this. What I really love about this, and going back to talking about great and interesting names, I always loved the name Idia for this particular cat because idio, as some of you may know, is the Latin word for we don't know, for not knowing something, for a lack of knowledge. Like the word idiot, basically, is a person who doesn't know anything. A disease that's idiopathic means the doctors don't know how it started or what's causing it. And so I want to talk about your cat, Idia, because I feel like everybody who loves cats can relate to this idea or has at one point in their life had the cat where you have to justify the relationship to other people, that other people and sometimes even other cat lovers don't get it because it seems like the cat is so much trouble or is so antisocial or is so neurotic or is so bitey that people can't really figure out why you love this cat. And often I find that people with cats like this, and I had a cat like this to some extent, Scarlet, although Idia certainly puts even Scarlet, my surly girl, to shame. But it's not just that you tolerate this cat or you live with this cat or even that you love this cat. It's that this becomes the cat to whom you are the most attached. Sort of the more difficult the cat is to acclimate or to love, the more you love this cat. And I feel as an onlooker, that was definitely your relationship with Idia, who yeah. I find to be a fascinating cat, and I find your relationship with her to be fascinating. And we are going to talk about that a little bit. But it's definitely the kind of cat I always feel like when you try to explain the relationship to other people, you always end up sounding like a battered wife who's staying with her husband, because you say things like, you don't know what she's really like. You know, you don't know what he's like when we're alone together. You don't know how much he loves me. And, and I hear you laughing because I'm sure you've had to explain these things. So first, let's talk a little bit before we get to the gotcha story. Let's talk a little bit about living with Idia. I remember one of the first stories two of the first stories that I heard about Idia. One was about how she treated your partner Sarah when the two of you first moved in together. And another was an incident, and I don't remember what happened, but it was a biting incident. But let's talk a little bit first about Idia's personality and how Idia reacted when you and Sarah combined households and moved in together.
Okay. Well, I think that you did a very apt description of our relationship, in that it was difficult, and through that difficulty, she did become. I love them all. I know all your listeners who have cats know that each and every one is special in their own way, and you can't pick favorites. And I'm not picking a favorite, but I will say that my relationship with Idia was extremely special and still is to this day, even though she is no longer with us. But yes, when Sarah and I first met, and we began to cohabitate and eventually move in together, Idia let it be known really quickly that she wasn't a fan.
And how did she do it? And Idia was this beautiful all white cat, I should say. So she had a very angelic look, but not an angelic disposition.
Well, see, I feel I have to defend her already.
Please do.
Okay. She was a beautiful cat. She was a solid white cat. She had yellow eyes, and she had a bit of Siamese in her. That was obvious. So she was very vocal. She was very smart. She was very in tune with you. And the thing about her, when I spoke to her, she would look at me and she would answer with her meows or sounds with inflection, to the point we could actually have a conversation. Sarah, my partner, can vouch for me that she says she has never seen a cat who comes so close to speaking English. She was very communicative. So she would look at Sarah with this air of disdain. But the big thing she would do, if Sarah left her clothing around, Idia happened to be one of I've read that 10% of female cats actually spray. I happen to be lucky enough to have one of those cats, and it was Idia. She would spray things.
I feel like we know where this is going.
Yes. So Sarah travels for a living, and I traveled a lot, and often on Sunday evenings she would hang her clothing on the doorknob as she's packing her suitcase. And then sometime during the week, Tuesday, Wednesday morning, I would get a call with some not so nice language. As Sarah has unpacked her suitcase, she has found that Idia sprayed her clothing.
So she would find out when she got to where she was going that she had been traveling with basically a suitcase full of cat pee.
Yeah, pretty much. And my response was, well, she does that. Don't hang your clothing on the knob. I mean,
that's spoken like a true cat person, by the way.
Right. The other thing she would do is she would literally spray her side of the bed, especially when we traveled. She would be angry that we were gone. We would come home from a trip, and we had to put something on the bed, something plastic. We knew she would do it. So we would have something, we had a plastic cover we would put on the bed, and sure enough, it would be a little pile of urine right on Sarah's pillow.
So now my understanding was that she liked to pee on Sarah's pillow pretty much all the time.
Yes. It probably was more common than I would like to admit. Yes.
And did she and Sarah sort of reach any kind of rapprochement as the months and the years passed, or was it always a semi-adversarial relationship?
I always say it proves how much she was committed to our relationship, that she loved Idia. She did, and I would say Idia mellowed over time. She did. We had her for 12 years, and she did mellow over time. And her last 2 or 3 years, I would say that Sarah loved her almost as much as me. Or if she put on a very good front if she did.
I think professionals call that Stockholm syndrome, I think is what that's called. But now, so Idia also had some health issues that required a lot of ongoing care. I know she was medicated, or was that for her anxiety? I do know that she.
Yes, she had feline hyperesthesia syndrome, which means that the nerve endings were extremely overly sensitive, especially along her back, and it made her very grouchy and aggressive. And that was one of the very trying, or the most trying aspects of having Idia, is that she was very aggressive, often toward other cats. And she took medication for that. And we tried to keep her on a dose that would make her, tolerate herself and us be able to tolerate her, but not overly medicate her. But that was a lifelong balancing act.
And I think there was one time when you were trying to give her medication and it did not go well.
Are you speaking of the biting incident?
I am. Yes, I am.
Okay. That actually transpired because she always picked one cat to pick on. She always had one cat in the house that she persecuted. It happened to be Sarah's cat, Nellie, who lived in her office. And so I was doing So
she didn't like Sarah or her cat. And I'm sorry to interrupt, but so she didn't like Sarah and she didn't like Sarah's cat. So her attitude was basically like, you guys are interlopers, get out of my house. Pretty much from the moment that Sarah and her cat moved in.
Yes.
Okay.
So poor Nellie lived in the office, but the upswing to that is that Nellie got to spend 8 hours a day with Sarah when she was home.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to interrupt again, because you say it like Idia was always persecuting a cat in the house. Like it was just a coincidence that she happened to be persecuting Sarah's cat. Whereas I feel that was probably not as coincidental as you're making it sound.
Well, perhaps not. It was the third cat that she had persecuted. I actually had to rehome one of my cats because she persecuted actually two cats. So Nellie was cat number 3, and the last one that she really persecuted. But I was holding Idia and walked into the office with her so that she could see Nellie, and she was acting completely fine, but all of a sudden she clamped down on my arm. So in a redirected, aggressive fashion, she literally bit my arm to the bone.
Oh.
And she hit a nerve, and I've never felt such pain. So I managed to turn around and get out of the office. Sarah heard some commotion and came, and she said that all she saw was my arm bleeding and me doubled over in pain. And of course, it ended up with me looking like the Pillsbury Doughboy from my hand up to my elbow and taking a round of antibiotics. But that was the worst.
We've all been there, by the way, with the swollen appendage that the cat bit. And so I will say, so Idia was a very difficult cat, and we're gonna, because I do want to get to, we tell gotcha stories on this podcast, and so I definitely want to get to that. But I do want to note, and I always found it interesting because I remember Sarah saying to Lawrence and me at one point that she was worried for how it, and again, you guys had 11 cats. We love cats and we lose them, and that is part of it. And it is devastating. I am certainly not trying to sweep over that or minimize that, in any way, shape or form. But I remember Sarah saying to Lawrence and me, specifically that she was worried about how it would be for you when you lost Idia. And so, and again, this is what I find fascinating. It's not just that you loved Idia, that you tolerated her, that you put up with her. She was, I have readers who use the expression soul cat, like the sort of the cat equivalent of a soulmate. And she kind of was that for you. I mean, and I'm not just saying that based on what we've said in this discussion so far, but knowing you for years and seeing how you've responded to other cats who remind you of Idia, and it's always Idia. It was always Idia who you talked about. I mean, she kind of was your soul cat, even though she was such a grumpy girl, to say the least.
She was. She was the thing that I looked forward to when I came home from work. She always greeted me at the door. She was often in the window. I have a picture everywhere I lived. I lived in 3 places with her, and I have a photo of her in the window waiting for me to get home. she loved me back. And I think what made it so special was working through the difficulties, and I understood her. I understood why she acted the way she did. And that just made it all the more special because no one else did understand it. I think Sarah began to, obviously, she saw how much we communicated with one another, and I had the most human-like relationship with Idia of any cat that I have ever had because she was so personable. And when she was happy, she was very happy and very fun to be around and playful. But she was my cat, and she always wanted to be with me. And there's something about having that pet that, loves you back and shows you in a real emotional way that they do love you and they want to be around you. So I guess because she was so grumpy and didn't like other people, the fact that she chose me just made me feel special too.
Understandably so. I feel that in human relationships, if you talk to somebody in love, somebody who feels that they found their human soulmate, what is so special about this person? So often what it comes down to is he gets me, she gets me. This person understands me, and we love our animals and they love us and we do understand them. But there is sometimes that moment where those relationships where you feel like you understand an animal who understands you back in a way that nobody else does or can. And I think that certainly overcomes a lot of urine on pillowcases for sure. But
it wasn't an easy path. I will say.
Yes.
For years, it was difficult, but we reached an understanding.
So tell us. So now we're going to backtrack a little, having heard about Idia's life with you. I want to go back to the story of how she came into your life in the first place and how you came to adopt her.
Right. That was just so... I never dreamed. I was not looking for another cat, trust me.
And I'm sorry, every gotcha story that anyone tells on the show always begins with, I wasn't looking for another cat. Every single one of them. and I just, and truly, it is one of those things cat people say, but man, they find us, and they find us. And people, you go out to get a dog on purpose. No one gets a cat on purpose. And yet we feel... we want cats. Maybe the first cat you get on purpose, I want a cat. But every subsequent cat is a cat that finds their way to you somehow. And I think that is part of the magic of the relationship we have with our cats. I'm sorry to interrupt. Please go on. You weren't looking for another cat, you say.
I was not looking for another cat. Yes. You're right. And there are so many points in this particular story. It could have gone a different way. So I really feel she was meant to be with me. It was one of those days that I was able to go and pick. Usually when I went to the shelter to pick a cat or two, I could only get one or two because of space availability. But on this particular day, I was extremely excited because I could pick, I believe, 6. It was either 5 or 6 cats, and that was the most I ever was able to get. So I loaded up my carriers. I had a list in my head because I would look at their website and pick kitties that I knew had been there the longest and whatnot. So I had 3 or 4 in mind when I walked in the door. And then I always left a space for one that might just speak to me as I walk up and down the kennels. And as I began to walk up and down the kennels, this white arm came out the door, and this very loud white kitty was meowing at me every time I walked past. So there was a girl with a notebook who would write down the kennel numbers of the cats I wanted, and she was the first one I pointed. I'll take her because people love white cats. They always get adopted quickly, and we needed to move our cats quickly. And she was very loud. She was very vocal. Take me, I'll take her. I took her to the shelter. She went through the system as normal. She went out to an adoption facility. I took her picture. I put her on the website. She was adopted within 2 to 3 days. She was promptly returned in 2 to 3 days. She was too aggressive, so she was returned. She went back through the system. I find her again at a different location, and I had a friend who was working there who said, this white cat is crazy. She runs,
I mean, it's not, it's not funny. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh. Cats being returned. I mean, obviously this is one of the hardest parts of rescue is when you think you found a home for a cat and the cat is returned.
Right.
I laugh only because we know that Idia's story has a happy ending with you.
Yes. So she's back out at a different facility where she stayed I was surprised, for 2 to 3 weeks. And I went to check on them and found that she was urinating blood. I immediately took her to my vet, and to make a long story short, they felt she was extremely stressed in that environment. So I agreed to keep her for 4 to 6 weeks to give her a break from the kennel and adoption environment. And while another funny aside, while at my vet, they realized she had 2 microchips already in her, 2 different microchips.
So she had 2 families previously.
Yes. She had a tattoo on her belly, so we knew which original rescue she came from. Then she had been through the system twice somewhere else too. So I was at least her 3rd owner.
So she's sort of like a foster kid who's been bounced around a lot in this system, basically. And so, yeah, I mean, so some of her aggression and hostility is understandable. She had certainly been failed, let's say, a number of times before she found you.
Yes. And she was only, 1 to 2 years old. Looking back at the pictures that I have of her at that time, I realized just how young she probably was. She was probably around one and a half, something like that. But after having her in my home for 4 to 6 weeks, I absolutely fell in love with her. She was so playful and sweet, and all the things I've already said about her that I didn't want to return her. And then after she settled in and she began to show some of her aggressive behavior, I knew I had made the right decision because I did not feel others would put up with her behavior. I was afraid for her. I was afraid that she would be possibly hurt because she could, it was very trying in the beginning working through some of her issues.
And that I think is sort of the difference, between let's say even somebody who loves animals and loves cats and a rescuer. And in that when you found that she was aggressive, and obviously this is why she had been returned so many times or abandoned or both. She was returned to shelters. It seems like she was abandoned. Right. Obviously it was because of her aggression. And you were the person who wanted to keep her because of the aggression, because that would make her hard to home. And I really think that is the difference. Look, not everybody's cut out to be a rescuer. Not everybody is cut out to home or work with a troubled cat. I can certainly understand the people who do not want an aggressive pet in their home. Obviously, that is not a good choice for a lot of people. People with other pets, right. People with children. There are any number of reasons why it's people who, there are just a million reasons why something like that doesn't work.
And it's certainly not good for the other cats who, are being
tortured.
The aggression is,
right.
Exactly.
But you were the person who said this cat is aggressive and is going to be hard to home, and therefore I must keep her in my home.
Yes, because I felt like I could manage the situation, and we did. And in the end, we had many more good years and good positive times, and no cats were harmed in Idia's life with us. For us, it became just a way of life. We knew her quirks, and it really became a non-issue, especially as she aged.
Do you think that maybe because you guys live with so many animals that she, I don't want to say, lost in the shuffle is the wrong way of putting it, but that, like I think about Lawrence and me, and we are in a house, and it's a good size house, but it's the 2 of us and 2 cats, and, in a very urban setting, we are all inside together all day, all the time. And I'm wondering if maybe Idia having, so much land and you guys having other animals, and if maybe that kept her from her issues from dominating your lives the way it might have in a smaller or more contained household.
That is a good point, and you're probably spot on there. We couldn't, we just simply didn't have the time to sit and dote on or, focus on that one issue. And with the cats we had, others had health issues during that time that required our attention more so. And we are outside a whole lot, so we're not inside all day long. But really, it just became... she really did mellow over the years, and it just became less of a problem. And with having the space, if she did, for instance, with the office cat, we were able to give that cat a very comfortable and fulfilling life and solve the issue of Idia's aggression at the same time.
And but before we, because I do want to talk about this cat that you have for adoption on the off chance that somebody listening might be a good person for that cat. So we've told all of these stories about Idia's aggression and Idia's biting and Idia's peeing and torturing other cats. Tell us a great Idia story. I mean, tell us the kind of story that if you were trying to explain to try to make someone understand, maybe someone who's not really a cat person, this is why I love this cat so much. What would be a positive Idia story that you would tell?
I don't know that I can recall a specific incident. It was more the way when I came home from work, she greeted me at the door and I would say, "Hi, Idia," and she would vocally answer. She would meow with a meow, like a hello. And as I walked through the house, she would meow, 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 meow. She just constantly spoke.
Telling you about her day.
Yes. And I could ask her a question and she would answer appropriately and with the expression in her face and the way she would just look at me, it was as if we were having a conversation. She also she was affectionate in the evening when I would sit down to watch TV. She wanted to be in my lap. She wanted to be near me, but we also knew, don't touch certain places. She would turn around and make a grumbling noise and let you know, don't touch there. She was just so personable. That was the thing that drew me to her so much, is just the way she communicated.
Do you feel that maybe the reason she got bounced around so much in a weird way is because the two of you were meant to be together?
I would like to think that.
It's a nice thought, isn't it? That it happened for a reason. That
I do believe that. Of all the cats I've rescued, I definitely think she ended up where she was supposed to be. I always try to remember that when
when you were wringing urine out of pillowcases.
Well, no. When I will say this, when of all the cats that I've lost, I always try to remember the good things, and with her especially, I told to comfort myself, I said I was so lucky to be the person, that Idia chose, or the person that Idia ended up with. So I would think, what if that had not happened? What if I had not picked her at the shelter that day? What if she had not been returned? What if I had not happened to go that day when she was sick? At so many points, it could have gone a different way. So I'm very grateful for the time that we had with her.
I think I was going to say, I think that's a very typical thing. I think that all the time with Homer, for example, and I do like to think that we were meant to be together and that it happened. But there were certainly so many places along the way where it could have happened differently. And it sometimes you do think about that, how close this incredibly meaningful thing in your life came to not happening, or to you not having that relationship.
Right.
I mean, it certainly seems to me as an onlooker that Idia was meant to be your cat and that you were meant to be her person. There are not a lot of people who are equipped to handle a cat with aggression issues. And it's amazing that the two of you found each other.
Thank you.
And before we wrap up, though, I do want you to tell us about the cat who is available for adoption. And then anybody, if you hear about this, if you're listening and you think you might be the right person for this cat, if you are, I'm going to say somewhere in the, local to the Tennessee area would probably be best and easiest. You can email me, just go to my website, gwencooper.com. There's a contact form and you can email me and I can put you in touch with Melanie. But Melanie, go ahead and tell us about the cat you have for adoption.
Well, we named her Myrna.
It's a great name. I love that name for a cat.
We struggled. It took us about 2 weeks to figure out a name for her. We tried different names and nothing fit. And then one day Myrna popped in my head and that's it.
Like Myrna Loy. It's a great name.
Exactly. She is an absolutely stunningly beautiful cat. She's solid gray. She's medium haired. She's 9 to 10 months old. She's had all of her vet work. We got her spayed. She's had all of her shots. She is healthy. And I feel certain that someone put her out in our rural area. We have the perfect drop-off location, unfortunately, and that has happened many times over the years, but I saw her before Christmas. And after Christmas, was able to trap her, and she was immediately, you could tell, so relieved. She was so friendly. She's definitely been someone's pet, and there are no houses around here where she would have come from, so she was scavenging for food. She was very, very thin, so I feel like she was unfortunately dumped here.
Oh.
But she's very sweet. She is a little quirky. She doesn't like a ton of petting, but she likes to be in your lap. She likes to be with you. And she uses the box. I mean, no bad habits, but she will nip. She's one of those cats that when she's overstimulated or you pet too much, she will nip you.
Gotcha.
But,
Clayton nips me if I'm not walking fast enough to get his food. So he nips at my ankles, like I'm cattle that he's herding, that like the expression herding cats. This is a cat who's trying to herd me. So I always find that endearing, by which I mean the opposite of that, by the way. But, so she nips a little bit. And, if you could send me some pictures and we will get, we're going to have those pictures up. Actually, if you go to podcast.gwencooper.com, you will see some pictures of this cat and we will get them up. And again, just hit the contact form at gwencooper.com. And email me if you are interested in learning more about Myrna. And Melanie, thank you so much for joining. And please give your 6 cats, 2 dogs, however many horses, chickens, and cows, all the best from me and from the listeners at the Curl Up with a Cattail podcast. And thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much, Gwen. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about my Idia.
Well, thank you for sharing her with us. And that concludes this episode of Curl Up with a Cattail with Gwen Cooper. Don't forget to invite your feline-loving friends to listen to new episodes along with you. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, get your copy of a free new book about Homer the Blind Wonder Cat, find out how you can get your name and your cat's name included in my next new book, or leave comments and questions for me to answer on future episodes, head on over to gwencooper.com now. Thanks so much for joining me. And don't forget to hug your cat today.